Okay, we're gonna get started. Good evening. This is Mark Sandine, Chair of the Hanscom Area Towns Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Emily Mitchell,
Present.
is
Turn off
Terry
my video.
is Terry Ackerman here yet? There she is.
Unmute.
Terry. Can you hear us, Terry?
Hello.
Excellent, thank you. Jim Hutchinson,
Present.
Gary Taylor, Ephraim Flint, Steve Hagan, Margaret Copey. Margaret, I
Here.
see you. Thank you. Jessica Casserly from Hanscom Air Force Base. Amber Goodspeed from Massport. Amber, we can't hear you. Michael Vadalaro.
Yep, here.
Okay. Is Simone Monteleone here?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
Okay, good evening. Richard Davey, Massport CEO.
I am. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. Senator Michael Barrett.
Good evening, Mark. I want to thank Executive Director for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Michelle Chicolo.
Hello, everyone. Thanks
Representative,
for
Representative Ken Gordon.
I'm here. Thank you for including me.
Representative Simon Cataldo.
Good evening, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Is Christopher Elliott, Chair of the Hanscom Field Advisory Commission here? Okay. And Charles Hornig from the Lexington Planning Board will join us later. The time is now 7:02 p.m. on Tuesday, January 28th, 2025, and I call this open meeting of the Hanscom Area Towns Committee to order. Please note that this meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Massachusetts state law, allowing public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely. For this meeting, the Hanscom Area Towns Committee is convening by video conference via the application Zoom, as posted on all 4 town websites, identifying how the public may join. And a quorum of the members of the Hanscom Field Advisory Commission may be present at this public meeting. Some reminders before we begin. This meeting is being recorded, so please be aware that others may see you, and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Before we get started, I'd just like to confirm that Terry Ackerman from Concord will be taking the meeting minutes for the meeting this evening.
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Terry. And I'd also like to acknowledge that this will be the last HATS meeting for Emily Mitchell, as she will be completing her term on the Bedford Select Board prior to our next HATS committee meeting. So thank you, Emily, for your service to both the town of Bedford and to the HATS community. It has been a real pleasure to serve with you, and I appreciate all your thoughtful contributions to the committee.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, we appreciate your contributions. Thank you so much. I'd like to provide a short overview of the meeting agenda for tonight. We're very excited to have Massport CEO Richard Davey attending our meeting tonight to present his vision for Massport's future, Massport's plans for Hanscom Airfield, and how Massport plans to meet its environmental obligations under its recently updated charter. And following that presentation, there will be an opportunity for elected and appointed officials to ask questions about Massport's plans. Our next agenda item after that will be to receive local updates from Massport and from Hanscom Air Force Base. And then we will then have an opportunity for community updates from the neighboring towns on topics such as MBTA zoning, affordable housing, energy code adoption, town meeting votes, and other major initiatives. And finally, at the end of the agenda, we'll approve meeting minutes from our last meeting and discuss future meeting attendees. With that, I'd like to proceed to the first item on our agenda, which is a presentation from Massport CEO Richard Davey. Richard is the Chief Executive Officer of the Massachusetts Port Authority since May of 2024. Rich has over 2 decades of experience in the transportation and infrastructure sectors, and prior to joining Massport, he was the president of the New York City Transit, the largest transit system in North America. He's also served as Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation under Governor Deval Patrick, and during that time, he also served as the chair of the Massport Board. He has also served as the general manager of the Massport Bay Commuter Rail and the MBTA. And I just would like to thank you for coming to our meeting today to tell us about your vision for the future. So
No,
with that, I'll turn it over to Richard and take it away, please.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you for the reading of my resume, which in short means it's all of my fault, all transportation issues in the Commonwealth. No, so thank you for allowing me to join tonight's conversation. I just want to give you sort of a brief overview of kind of what's on my mind. As Mark, as you mentioned, I was appointed in May and joined in August, so it's been about 5 months now, and so getting my feet wet back in Massachusetts and Massachusetts transportation in particular. So a few things. First, what have I found at Massport? I have found, a pretty incredible organization of 1,300 people who are pushing hard to have economic impact in Massachusetts, over $22 billion across all of the things that we do for the Commonwealth, and I'm proud of that. I think I said we punch above our weight for 1,300 people. That's quite an impact. We had a record-breaking year in 2024 across most of our assets. I'll talk about that in just a second. So Logan Airport, we had 43.5 million folks come through the airport, the highest ever. We had almost 500,000 folks come through our cruise port terminal, the highest ever. And over 225, almost 230,000 folks through Worcester Airport, the highest in 35 years. Notice I didn't say Hanscom. Actually, Hanscom's overall aviation operations this in 2024 was the lowest spent in the last 6 years, but for 2020, of course, during COVID. Doesn't mean Hanscom is more important. We'll get into the Hanscom, both concerns and issues, no doubt. So I'm excited for what the team has been doing and excited for the future overall of Massport. And I laid out just a week or so ago sort of 6 areas of focus. And notwithstanding the flurry of executive orders that have been occurring the last week, the dizzying number, we're studying to see how that impacts us overall. But 6 places we're focused on. So first is managing growth. We'll talk, no doubt, about that relative to Hanscom, but it's a concern of mine, particularly someone who's spent most of his career in trying to get people out of their cars and onto public transportation, but particularly for Logan Airport. For those of you for being our customers there, I appreciate that. Thank you. Our challenge there is not the land side, it's the air side and getting folks to Logan Airport. And so continue to double down on our HOV strategies, for example. One other idea that we have started to look at is remote terminals, so that the principle being you could check in at, say, one of our Logan Express sites where you park your car, like Framingham or Braintree, and actually check in through TSA, get on a sterile bus, and be dropped off at Logan Airport. So we got to be creative in how we get people to the airport, for sure. But broadly speaking, managing growth is important. Second is customer satisfaction. We are in the business of customer satisfaction. I don't think government services often think that way. Sometimes it's about moving vehicles or moving planes, for that matter, and those vehicles and planes are full of people, and we got to make sure that our customers are satisfied. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about that across our modes, Logan and the cruise port in particular. Third is financial performance. Massport, unlike some of the other agencies I've had the privilege of running, is a financially stable place, and so continuing to make sure we do that. Our maritime business in particular is a bit challenged, and so making sure that we're able to make investments in our maritime business in particular is going to be critical for us, just from a financial perspective. The fourth is fighting climate change. I know we'll get into this obviously, but we know we have a critical role to play. And so whether that's in our scope 1 emissions in, at our facilities, but also too, and I know this has been a subject of some controversy from folks, and I'm happy to discuss it. I also think we have opportunity and responsibility, frankly, to look at the challenges of aviation fuel. Almost 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions at Logan Airport are fuel, and that's a huge challenge. I know it's one that was raised, and I think the Hat's letter to the secretary in regard to the development. And I know, for some folks, they hear SAF and they think it's a 4-letter word, not a 3-letter word. I can assure you, we're looking at good SAF, not bad SAF. There is bad SAF that folks cling to, and we have seen some promising technologies. Even a company here in Massachusetts that is really focused on clean SAF, and so it's a place I think we can play as an economic development agency, and one that really solves the challenge permanently. We want to be an employer of choice, and so Massport has always been seen as a place that has been desired to be a place to come and work. It's mission driven. Our employees are. We did a survey with our employees back in November. They're excited to be part of the Massport team and see that their mission is about advancing the Commonwealth, and so continuing that. Our employees are our most important asset. And then finally, leadership and innovation. And this is a bit of a catch-all, but I think one where Massport has played leadership in a number of roles. So, for example, we own a number of acres of land in the seaport in Boston. It is designated as in the designated port area, which means it's marine industrial. And we have typically focused our efforts there on things like fish processing, for example. And we're really challenging ourselves to say, is there a role that we can play in advancing the blue tech and the blue economy? And that could take any forms from offshore wind or supportive offshore wind to harnessing the ocean for energy. So we're excited about that. There are a few other things, affordable housing, that we've taken an opportunity to work on in some of our land in South Boston as well, trying to address some of the Commonwealth's challenges. So, I know I come here tonight as someone who's representing an agency that there's some controversy and consternation. All I'll say is this, a couple things. One is, and the senator knows this, we had a animated conversation a week and a half ago. I am not intimidated by that. I've spent 20 plus years in my life trying to better the state that I was born in, and having public feedback and having debate and discussion is just part of what I've signed up for. And so listening to folks and taking that in is critical. So that's one. I think two is, we're not a perfect agency at all. Part of our job is to continue to listen and to make sure we're listening to all of our constituents and our customers and folks. And I probably won't have all the answers that folks will hope for tonight, but my commitment is we'll get back to you with our views. And then lastly, I know there'll be probably specific questions about the Hanscom development. I'll give you my view. Obviously, it was not something that was started under my tenure. It was about 18 months or so ago, or 2 years ago. It's in a process right now, as folks know, and a process that I know EEA took very seriously, and the comments that were provided by these folks on this call and others as well. And we told the developer that they need to take that seriously if they plan to continue. And so getting answers to the information that Secretary Tepper asked for, and that's going to take some time. We think probably at least 3 to 6 months, but we will see. So again, let me maybe, Mark, stop there. But again, I just, that's sort of an overview. I didn't want to dominate the conversation, and I just certainly want to take questions or hear people's perspectives. But that's, the frame of I come at, and the spirit I come at tonight is to listen and to, do the best we can to be good stewards of your communities and the other communities of which we are a neighbor of. So let me stop there.
Do you have a vision? Thank you for that. Do you have a vision for where you think you want to be, say, in 5 years?
Yeah, good question. So a couple things there. One is we are about to kick off a strategic planning process with our board, which will be public. The last time Massport did a strategic plan, as you noted, when I was transportation secretary, I also was chair of the board back in 2013 and 2014. And the team was attempting to do one in 2019, 2020. Obviously, COVID hit, and it was all about survival. So that mark will give us what we expect to be as a 10-year look ahead. So what does Massport look like in 2035 across aviation, maritime, real estate? How do trends in those industries affect what we're doing? How do new technologies, for bad or good, impact those businesses? I expect, net zero. We have, obviously, I think folks know, a pretty ambitious net zero 2031 goal. I see the board doubling down on that. That's certainly would be
Okay.
management's recommendation. So I think that's where you'll, see. So I mean, that's sort of how I think we're going to create that vision. But in terms of the vision, as I said, managing growth, I'd love to be a top 5 airport at Logan Airport for customer satisfaction. JD Power and Associates put us in the top 10 last year. For the first time, we are number 10. So I'd love to see us do a little better there. As I said, financial performance, fighting climate change, being an employer of choice, and taking on some leadership are those places where I think, certainly over the next 5 years, and I think the board will endorse those in our 10-year strategic plan.
Can you say a word or two about how you would think the HATS committee and the Hanscom area towns um, can be most effective in working with Massport on environmental concerns that we have?
Yeah, I mean, look, I honestly think that the concerns that were raised and the data raised um, in the correspondence to EEA on the question of that development were important. But putting the development aside for a moment, I think there are other challenges and things that I do want to work with this group and your respective delegation as well on long-term environmental policy for those, for aviation and maritime as an example. We announced, I know this is not relevant to the surrounding communities here on the phone, but another place where we were, I thought, lagging behind was our commitment to greening our maritime assets and cruise ships coming in and parking and I don't know, keeping their diesel engines on literally, and that's something we just said no, we're going to address that now with shore power. So um, I think in terms of working with this community, and look, I'm not going to have all the answers, nor is my team, and we may politely and respectfully disagree from time to time. That's okay as well. But I think this kind of dialogue on a regular basis. I know, for example, we did I think it was a runway project a couple of months ago, and we had lots of dialogue at Hanscom, lots of dialogue, a rehab, project, lots of dialogue with community who were concerned about, truck traffic as an example, and making sure that we're doing all we can to inform you what we're doing, so people aren't surprised. You understand what we're trying to do at Hanscom. And then again, getting your feedback to see if we can make it less impactful. So for projects like that, I think we should continue, this productive dialogue.
Thank you. You just mentioned a minute ago that you're in the process of doing this 10-year strategic plan.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you might be able to reflect on the recent charter change and how that might influence that vision for the future.
Yeah, I mean, again, this might be a point of debate, but I think the enabling statute changes that were made by the state legislature largely embodied what we believe we're trying to do now, which is to not only consider but really think about the environmental impacts of all of our assets. Candidly, which is why I'm very much focused on how we can accelerate the adoption of good SAF, because at the end of the day, I mean, aviation, general aviation is responsible for, I think, 8% of the total aviation's greenhouse gas emissions. 85% of greenhouse gas emissions in the US from aviation fuel are commercial. And so in about the 7 or 8% is military and US government. Like, it is it's the perplexing issue to, to eliminate the impact on climate in aviation. And I think that is, look, I mean, we can debate about whether we're going to get people to stop flying or to change their behaviors. And I mean, in the last week, I'm not feeling good about that. So I'm trying to, I would love to work with you all to find practical, but scalable solutions with a sense of urgency, as well.
Thank you. So what I'm planning to do here in terms of questions is open it up to select board members of HATS and then go to other elected officials for some
Great.
questions that they might have, and appointed officials with some questions that they might have. So I would start with Emily Mitchell,
Great.
who is a
Thank you.
select board member in
Mhm.
Bedford.
Yes, so Emily Mitchell from Bedford. I wanted to
And
expand
this is
and
going to be
kind of,
unfair because I know this is your last meeting, and if I say I have to get back to you, then that would be unfair. So I'll try not to do that.
it's okay. I'm still on the board until March 8th, so you've got time.
Got
We'll give all of our questions to Emily then.
it. Perfect.
Um, so I wanted to look at one of Mark's questions from a slightly higher level and
Sure.
ask how you understand Massport's relationship to the HATS towns. What are Massport's responsibilities to us, and vice versa. I think
Yeah.
we've had some points of frustration and conflict, over the years. What we often hear when at HATS or HVAC meetings, we're bringing constituent concerns about noise, about potential lead exposure, about traffic and those kinds of things. What we hear from Massport is, we hear you, but we are subject to the terms of our grant agreement with FAA. We have to do what this grant agreement says, or we don't get any money and we can't pay our bills. So if the FAA doesn't care or doesn't give us any resources or prioritization to deal with those things, we're not going to deal with them. And so I'd like to know your thoughts on, what that relationship is, and whether you see points where we could be working forward.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question. So look, that shouldn't be the first answer we give you. It might be an answer we have to give you at some point, but it shouldn't be the first answer. So for example, like, I'm not sure FAA cares about traffic, right? So I mean, air traffic, sure, but vehicular traffic maybe a little less so. And so that's what I mentioned, for example, on that project we had earlier this year with the runway rehabilitation project, by the way, which, we probably will continue to do more of that over time, right? That's just, being safe and being good stewards of an airport, whether or not we have growth. Those are the kinds of things we should be easily working on together. Time of day that we're delivering trucks and not, congesting corridors around school buses or like, I mean, these are the kinds of, I think, detailed questions that we can have conversations about and ensure that we're having as least impact as possible on the surrounding communities, but also at the same time, providing a safe airport. I don't think those have to be incongruent, right? I don't. So part of that is we just have to continue to make sure we're communicating. We're not surprising. I mean, I always have two rules about public and working with labor unions and whatnot: is never surprise them and never lie to them. So we shouldn't be doing either one of those as like a table stakes. And I'm not concerned about the lying part. We're not. But if we're not communicating, we're surprising you, that's a problem. So we'll just do a better job on that. Now there are going to be bigger issues where noise, for example. I mean, it is an airport, right? And I understand that there are communities that surround that airport, and we have to work through that. But at some point, sometimes there may be constituent asks, and I've again had this throughout my career where we just can't get to the exact place a constituent might want, the nature of our business or the nature of what we're doing. But I mean, my view is, again, we shouldn't start with the no, or shouldn't start with the we can't. Let's start with what we think we can do, and we might not get to 100% of what you're hearing from your constituents, but we'll try.
Mark, I do have a couple other questions, but do you want to do a round robin and
Why don't we
Yeah.
go for your questions and then we'll go to Jim?
go through mine? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and then go to Jim, and then we'll go.
Okay. So I'm curious how Hanscom is different in your mind from Logan and from Worcester. I certainly have my own thoughts. I think I'm interested, particularly given your background in public transportation, um, in how we are different, but I'm curious about how you see Hanscom fitting into Massport's larger portfolio and what specifically you understand to be unique about Hanscom.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, it's incredibly unique, I would think. When I was secretary, I had responsibility, or at least, capital responsibility for, at the time, the 41 airports across the Commonwealth, right? So not just the Massport, three assets. So, I mean, look, Hanscom's unique for a bunch of reasons, right? It's a former military base, but still has military activity on it, right? It's an active base with a mission, for sure, which makes it unique, certainly in our portfolio. It's the only one. A lot of research and development that's occurring there. And that's been the history of Hanscom, of course. We don't have commercial flights, and we are not pursuing commercial flights, I can tell you that. For either, we do for Worcester and Logan, clearly, but not for Hanscom. It's an attractive, I mean, just be honest, this is why we're having the debate about the development. It's an attractive place for private businesses to, to utilize. And so balancing that utilization with some of, the challenges raised. It's also, that's about 30% of the activity there. The other 70% is other activity, right? So you've got a lot of, flight schools and other activity that are occurring there, recreational aircraft activity as well, which is unique. There's not a lot of that in Logan or Worcester. And then in terms of the community, Worcester is a little more secluded from neighboring neighborhoods, so there are sort of less concerns. My experience there, but obviously Logan and Hanscom have very similar histories in that they're impacted communities that are close by, and I certainly know. Being a Bostonian, there are particular natural resources that are right outside of Hanscom that are important to your communities. And so, whether that's Minuteman Park, whether that's Walden Pond, I mean, these are iconic places that, we need to be thoughtful about our impacts as well. So it's not just about people, but it's also sort of the natural resources that we hold ourselves out. So, I mean, I'm happy to hear your thoughts, but about the uniqueness, but those are a few things that come to mind about both the location, what we're around, and also the historical mission of the airport.
Thank you. Just one last question. I know we'll talk a lot about the proposed North Airfield development. I don't know if you've had a chance to come out to Hanscom and sort of drive around that part of the airfield yet. And
Not yet. Not
Okay.
since I become CEO, I have not.
Okay. So that development is pretty much exclusively within Bedford's town limits. And so we are particularly concerned about changes to traffic patterns, impacts on our infrastructure, impacts on our environment. The development proposes to use a couple curb cuts on Hartwell Road, which goes through a bunch of residential neighborhoods. It's a very narrow, kind of windy, typical New England up and down a hill, 25 miles an hour, bad sightlines kind of place. And I think one of concern that I've heard from a lot of constituents is that this particular development and the clientele that they're seeking to serve are not local residents. They're not Bedford people. These are very wealthy, business people who want to come park their jets. And I'm curious, in your mind, what benefits do you think this expansion brings to Bedford specifically?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't studied, where the executives of some of these businesses live. So I can't speak to that. I think what I can generally speak to is the economic development that Massport brings to the Commonwealth is significant, and I think lifts lots of communities. That said, on the curb cut and the traffic patterns, honestly, I don't have enough information to comment. So, and I'm happy to understand it more in depth. But I do know I'm pretty sure we do pay a pilot agreement, or we pay a agreement, I think, with the town. No,
No, there's a fuel flowage fee that comes to the towns, but there's no pilot.
got
So,
it, got it. So,
but I would
there
encourage you
is
to come out.
revenue. No, but there is revenue that goes to the town, though, based on our activity. So, um, but in any event, I'm happy to learn more.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you. Good evening, Rich. Thanks so much for your presentation and for your big picture of what Massport is doing. I think it's healthy for all of us to keep a little perspective when we talk about these issues, and I appreciate that you have to juggle lots of different things in your role. So thank you for that viewpoint. I don't quite have that luxury. I have a little bit narrower viewpoint, as you might be able to predict, and I get constituents asking me questions like, is sustainable aviation fuel really scalable to solve the problem that we're, facing? As you point out, 85% of greenhouse emissions come from aviation fuel, not on the ground, but with the jets in the air, or, getting up into the air. So can you talk a little bit more about how you are comfortable posing sustainable aviation fuel as the answer to this rather central issue in our hopes to reduce greenhouse emissions while we let residents fly where they want to?
Sure. I mean, so Jim, I think, the practical reality is we're not going to stop people from traveling, right? And I get that. And the Senator and I had a good conversation last week. Maybe some usage is stopped, and maybe some of it's at Hanscom. Maybe, I don't know. The fact of the matter is 85% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States don't come from private jets or rich people. They come from commercial aircraft, right? And I just, and we could close Hanscom and roll it up and make it a soccer field tomorrow. But from my perspective, to your point of the broader view, aviation, greenhouse gas emission aviation fuel is still a problem. And it might not be for if we did that scenario, it might not be for Lincoln and Bedford and others, but it would be, right? And so I'm not saying that SAF is going to solve the development problem. I'm not tying the two together, actually. What I'm saying is, if we're going to solve aviation's imprint on greenhouse gas emissions, it's got to be the fuel. And my team is doing a great job. We're changing light bulbs, and we're electrifying ground equipment, and we're doing all sorts of stuff. We're spending a lot of money to do that. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a real small part of the greenhouse gas emissions at Logan and Hanscom and Worcester. It just is. So so in terms of your constituents, what do you say? I think you can say, and I think this has been a little, I hope that if one thing you get from this call is that I don't think all SAF is good SAF. SAF that is being manufactured in Texas and trucked up in a diesel truck to Massachusetts ain't going to cut it. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's going to be more greenhouse gas emissions getting the damn thing to us if it was even 100% sustainable. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the opportunity to see where Massport can play a role in seeding, truly innovative SAF. There's a company in Charlestown, for example, Massachusetts, Lydian. Small, it's just starting. I looked up the first electric car and when that was rolled out in the United States, like the first true real electric car was about 15 years ago. And in 15 years, sort of where have we come? We've got a lot more to do. So look, I don't think SAF and true sustainable SAF is going to happen tomorrow either, but we need to start somewhere. And so to me, it's a greater issue. So I don't want folks to, at least here tonight, think that I'm selling SAF to get a developer through Hanscom. That's a separate process, and we'll work through that. But at the end of the day, we got to solve this problem. And we got to solve it nationally, and I got to solve it through 3 airports. So, and I don't think all SAF is good SAF. It just isn't. I mean, that's the reality.
That's great to hear, and I agree that we have to solve the problem. I'm delighted with the image of having Massachusetts play a part in in advancing SAF technology. That's fun. That fits our history of technology innovation.
You know,
But when I read the reports from people who are knowledgeable about this, they're doubtful about the scalability of the existing technologies. There's reports that say that if we did it with corn-based biofuels, we'd need to have more land used for corn production than is available in the entire United States.
yeah,
So-
which is and which is to me is bad SAF, Jim, right? So if you look at what Lydian's doing, for example, again, they're in their early stages. Some other biomass. There's also, using waste and trash, if you will. And again, this is not going to be 100% of the solve. I mean, if we were concerned about that, we wouldn't be having the Zoom call right now, because I'm going to guess some of the electricity that's being produced on the Zoom call is by a coal-fired plant somewhere. So, I'm not trying to be cheeky, but you know what I mean? Like,
Agreed.
you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. But I am not going to tell you, like, again, trucking SAF in that was, created from corn and Iowa, and trucking it in a diesel truck is the answer. It ain't the answer. That is,
Well,
I'm with you on that.
I love to try to solve problems too. I've been a problem solver my entire career. But I'm looking at it from sort of even from a problem solving point of view.
Mhm.
I wonder if Massport has any thoughts about carbon dioxide per passenger mile kind of metrics for judging which kind of transportation they should be facilitating.
Yeah, I mean, so
You want to be efficient, and we need to get passengers where they want to go, but can't we do something about making it more efficient?
yeah, and I think that the answer is the aviation industry is. We are trying as well. We might not be trying as some folks in the call would like, but the answer is we are. Aviation has gotten has improved its greenhouse gas emissions as a general matter, but there's obviously a lot of work to do. There's only so many more aerodynamic changes one can make to an airplane, for example. There's also technology out there that's being developed that, for example, there's a few companies that we're aware of that are testing more autonomous type aviation, which reduces aviation fuel usage by 4, 5, 6%, because the pilots, i.e., the automation, is more efficient. So it's not going to just be SAF. I think there are other things that we want to look at to promote efficiency here. But look, I'm with you. But the flip side, I also look at the family of 4 from Saugus walking through JetBlue's terminal and going to Disney World, and like, are we going to tell them they can't fly? No, right? So, and so like that's why, again, I think it's holistically is how I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, I hear you. And I was really going after private jets, which are
No, I
the
know you were. I appreciate that, and I get that that's
least efficient form.
Yeah,
But
no, I get that.
let me get to my final question, because I got to give other people a chance here. It's some of the issues that Massport faces this is something Emily hinted at, are really FAA issues,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Like, for instance, even if you had SAF, you can't make jets that use the airports that you control use it. You're not allowed to require them to use SAF. So how do you deal? And in general, FAA doesn't seem that interested in managing CO2 emissions. So how do we deal with that as a state that has pretty serious climate goals?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And given the change in Washington last week, it's 1,000 times or 100,000 times harder, right? So a couple thoughts there. I think one, this is why for me, pushing a state approach, or at least a state commitment around some of these, is important. We can't rely on the FAA. I mean, as you mentioned, we can't require. So even if we could require, right now, the FAA only allows up to 50% blend of SAF right now. So even if we had all the SAF in the world, we get, I mean, 50% would be a lot, but it wouldn't be 100%, right? That's the current FAA standard. blend of staff. It's continuing to push, you know, FAA, which is, you know, I don't know if my friends are FAA or on the phone, but continuing to push that this is a, you know, an issue that should be something that they're thinking about on a regular basis. I can tell you, you know, we had some good conversations with the Department of Energy, again, before last week, about, you know, some of their developments around not only investing in true sustainable aviation fuel, but also some of these questions of efficiency in flying as well. But I think for us, you know, continued, and, you know, you've got great elected officials as well to advocate to our you know, counterparties, the FAA. We got to play the long game on this for sure. But yes, you are right. I mean, look, the FAA, you know, I'm an attorney, we can debate it, but has non-discrimination, you know, clauses, and so there are some things that would suggest that even if there was a, you know, a radical change in policy in the state of Massachusetts, we would, you know, the federal government would not be there with us at all.
Great, thank you, Kurt.
So Terry, do you have any questions?
Some of my questions have been asked already. Thank you very much, Mr. Davy, for coming. I do have one kind of follow-up question.
Yeah.
Based on a few things you said. So I appreciate you have several or many different objectives to balance at Massport. And the new charter is now adding another goal of looking at environmental and greenhouse emissions, in addition to your other objectives that you had at Massport before. So I also heard you refer to Massport, I think, as an economic development agency. So I guess my question is, when these objectives come into conflict, you know, economic development versus, you know, public health with noise or climate change, how will you weigh all of these different objectives? Is economic development always going to be the primary one, or how will you think of it?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question, Terry. I think, you know, you've spent your time in public life as well. I think this is more of an art than a science. And, you know, I would say we got to find a way to balance them all. I mean, you know, God forbid if we were a wonderful economic development agency and then the human race perished, that wouldn't be too successful, would it? Right? Given greenhouse gas emissions and given climate change. You know, on the flip side, Massport has committed to at least $500 million in its capital plan to reduce its own greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, there are frankly some people who say, a waste of money. We don't think that's the case. So I think for me, it's an art versus science. And candidly, I think these conversations and the conversations with our board and trying to challenge each other about what the right balance is important. I'm sure there's nobody who would, you know, there's going to be someone who always tells me that I've gotten it wrong, that I was weighing too much of economic development or too much of climate change or too much of, you know, some other aspect. But I think that's, you know, I've you know, been in this sort of business a long time, and I'm not sure I ever get it perfectly right, weighing the pros and cons of investments in public transit and otherwise. But you know, I think one of the thing, I mean, you know, what I've tried to sort of commend to folks is, you know, it to me, we're not going to be successful at Massport if we're not making, you know, these kinds of investments. You know, communities will be up in arms, and you know, we'll spend more time in litigation than we will in getting things done, as an example. Or in the case of you know, of Logan Airport and climate change, like, you know, I'm the largest land lord in the Seaport District, and if that thing goes underwater, like we haven't, you know, putting aside the moral imperative, we can economic imperative to make sure that we're thinking about resiliency in the seaport. So I don't have a perfect answer, Terry. I really appreciate the question. I'd probably spend more of my time grappling with this. Well, hold us accountable. I don't mind that. Push me, push us.
Okay, we will. We'll remember
No, I,
that.
pre-
Thank
no,
you.
I knew you would anyways without the invitation. So,
Okay,
but I respect that tremendously.
thank you.
Okay, Rich, I think what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our legislative delegation for some questions, and starting with
Sure.
Senator Michael Barrett.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Rich. And I want to thank you for coming to my office some time
course.
ago. We did have quite a spirited
We did.
conversation, but you were very generous with your time, and you proved yourself a good listener. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. And folks should know on this call, you and I go back a long way and worked on a lot of other stuff together. So it's never personal. It's always about, the goal. So thank you.
So I want to take advantage of your capacity and inclination to listen, and just be as candid with you as I can be. First of all, even in the conversation we've had so far, and I want to thank my colleagues in government for proffering questions to you, we have established some useful things. We've established that you can't do much to promote good SAF, not given the man who's president, and not given the conservative turn that FAA is certainly going to take. And you can't do very much to bring on good SAF. So you're in to some degree, you can affect the emergence of SAF, even if it were real, at the volumes that the world needs in order to green aviation. You're not sitting at a very pivotal place. You can have more influence over it than many of us in our 4 towns. But fundamentally, the use of SAF is going to depend on the choices that private owners of aircraft make. It might be Delta at Logan. It might be an owner of a corporate jet that currently houses at Hanscom. So there is a sense in which you're rolling out SAF, I think, as a shield, and in order to disarm us. It's a talking point. It's nothing that you're responsible for.
I mean, I totally disagree, but you should ask your question, or I mean, I didn't say that we had no power, and I didn't say we're doing it as a shield. So I just wanted to make sure that I vehemently disagreed with you on that point. All
right. So what is your action plan to materially affect the availability of SAF in the United States of America? And of course, I would point out to you, please consider this by way of it's being a question, that we have lots of startups in Massachusetts that hope someday to cure cancer. And we certainly want to encourage them to try, but none of us go out and encourage our kids to smoke cigarettes because the cure is going to come in their lifetimes. So there is a calendar disconnect here. We've got some tentative startups who may or may not get funding in the Trump era. But meanwhile, don't we have a relatively near-term problem? I want to couple the calendar mismatch that is embodied in your advancing SAF with a second point. I think you would agree, Rich, that no one here is trying to tell people that they can't fly. What we are hoping to suggest to people is that they fly first class if they have a whole bunch of money. So since first class on a commercial jet per passenger mile is much less polluting than the use of a private jet, why don't we converge around a marketing program to encourage the use of first class by the sort of folks who might be tempted to use high polluting private jets instead? So those are 2 questions. Why isn't first class good enough for people with money? And secondly, really, how much can you do other than talk about it to keep us a little off balance. What can you do to really promote SAF worldwide and nationwide, or is this just going to be a Massachusetts thing?
Right. So I may I? So I don't I went to Holy Cross for college, and one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from my history professor, Father Kuzniski, who told me there's only one God, and you're not him, Rich. So I don't I don't. I hope I didn't leave the impression that I was going to change the world or change the United States SAF. I'm only one humble servant in Massachusetts. But hell, why not? So why not start here, Senator? Right. So what can we do? We can do a few things. I mean, I think we can do lots of things. And I was disappointed when we met. I pitched some of these ideas, and you said I can't work with you at all until you stop the development in Hanscom. Fine. But look, there are tax incentives, right? There are 3 or 4 states that have tax incentives for SAF. Minneapolis has a whole hub of private and public sector companies, academia, and aviation as well, looking at ways to scale again true SAF. We're looking at that. I mentioned one particular company to you a couple weeks ago. I hope you looked into it, Lydian. Again, it's small, but there's promise there. What can Massachusetts do to, they're building a SAF facility in Charlestown. Can I help facilitate the sale of the beginnings of their SAF to Hanscom or to Logan or Worcester or TF Green for that matter? I think we can do all of that. You mentioned like smoking cigarettes. I mean, look, as I said, to take your metaphor, it's like, all right, well, maybe we're not telling kids to smoke 3 packs a day. Maybe we're telling them to smoke 2.5 packs a day, because at the end of the day, I mean, again, we'll talk about the development will have its sort of day with the EA process. But at the end of the day, if I close Hanscom tomorrow, 85% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from commercial aviation. And that is, it can't be one or the other. It has to be all of the above, in my view. So, this is where I think we respectfully disagree, that it shouldn't just be one thing. I think it needs to be all of the above. We can debate the development at Hanscom and maybe it not happen, but at the same time, I think we can also progress on sustainable aviation fuel, because that's the real issue. It's the real issue. And even if,
Okay.
you said Celtics planes were fine and Bruins planes were fine at Hanscom, you said that to me. So, if we start like chipping away at the rich people, fine. But there are, I'm just telling you, like, this is the issue, and I'm very passionate about it. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just very passionate about it, as are you. And I think we've got to do all the above.
One more question, and then I'll yield it. Thank you, Rich. By the way, my grandfather went to Holy Cross. My uncle went to Holy Cross.
Choo choo,
So,
run.
my family's from Worcester. We can try to out-Worcester each other, but it probably we can probably spend our time doing something better. Let me just say that something has changed since you and I spoke, and that is that Mr. Trump has really made his presence felt across the country and worldwide, and it is having an appreciable impact on the people that I know and the people that I represent. People are discouraged. Worries that they might have had 6 months ago are all coming true.
Yep.
And people are disheartened and demoralized. I happen to think that changes the calculus for you and the board. I think if you were to do this now, Massport would become the face of Trumpism in Massachusetts. And I think that would be very unfortunate. So timing, to some degree, really matters. And we're not free. We're no longer in a position where Massport were to move ahead with hangars would be a kind of outlier. Instead, Massport would be joining Mr. Trump's parade. I respectfully submit. That's the psychological import. I don't mean that you would do that with your intent.
Oh,
the way it'll be processed by people is, wow, the country is in a place that leaves me deeply uncomfortable. And now Massachusetts is in a place that's beginning to leave me deeply uncomfortable. So I am hoping that you can figure out how to demonstrate that the future for our state, the near-term future, is going to be a little different than it is for the country. I hope you can figure out how to make sure that a bunch of very wealthy people who do whether they intend to or not, represent the wealth divide in this country, don't come out to Hanscom and also magnify the divide over climate. The confluence of wealth disparity and high pollution impact would be a lot for people to take. And there is an unfortunate degree, unfortunate because you didn't ask for this, there is an unfortunate sense in which the decision you make is going to have very high symbolic impact in addition to everything else that we've talked about. And I dread the day that Massport decides that, in a sense, and you have a very conservative board in my reading, even the Democrats nominally are conservative. And so there's a sense in which some of your board members are saying, you know what, Trump has opened the door. Wealth is good and unmitigated good. People have a right to do whatever they want with their money. That's the Trump message. This is our moment to strike and to tell those folks out in the suburbs to stuff it. I am a little concerned that some of your board members are probably harboring those innermost thoughts, even keeping them from you. If a decision is made to move forward in this current polarized political climate, it will have ramifications. I'm not just in terms of people's sense of well-being and sense of faith that Massachusetts can steer its own independent course. So I want to plead with you to think about some of the larger implications of this decision. And again, I want to thank you for hearing me out.
Sure. Mark, just a time check. 8:10 is when I have to drop. So
Okay.
about 13 minutes. And I want to be respectful and
Thank you.
happy to answer questions offline as well. So
Okay,
but just
I'd like to
wanted-
just try to get to the remaining legislative delegation. I'll start with Rep. Simon Cataldo.
Hey, Rich, and thanks so much for being here. You and I have not yet had the opportunity to speak, so it's great to meet you. I wanted to just two things real quick before turning it over to my colleagues. One is I wanted to pick up where Jim Hutchinson left off in his, he had kind of posed the question of, in the situation where a lot of our constituents are coming to us. I wanted to just provide a little bit of context for that. In the town of Concord, which is one of the 4 communities that I represent, the town has committed to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And in working toward that goal, they've installed about 11.2 megawatts of solar, which is, for our town, is a lot. It's a big effort and it's a significant expense. One private jet cancels that out completely. So I just kind of drew a little bit of determinism from some of your remarks in terms of the overall impacts of increased net flight volume out of Hanscom. For our communities, it really is a big deal in relation to the very sincere and, in some senses, costly efforts that we're making here on the local level. So I wanted to provide that context. I also really appreciated that you acknowledged at the beginning of your remarks the inadequacy, and you could use more colorful terms. I certainly have, others certainly have, with respect to the DEIR submitted by the proponents of this project. I guess my question for you is, at what point does Massport just say no based on the inadequacy? I mean, there was no credible, reasonable response to Secretary Tepper's questions. Just a tiny bit of pressure testing, and you went right through almost everything that they were saying. And my House colleagues and I really laid that out in great detail, I think, as others have, with respect to the inadequacies of what the proponents have said in response to those questions. So, and I'll stop talking after this. Does there come a time when Massport says you have not been able to answer those questions? And I would pick a little bit of a, nit, or I think you're right that we may see the impact and the import of the statutory change to Massport's charter a little bit differently in this respect too. So that is a condition that's changed. But that is my question for you. does Massport ever say no when the proponent clearly fails any rational test in terms of responding to the secretary's questions?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Rep, and I think we're gonna come see you in person, so I look forward to that. So it has Massport. I mean, I don't know the history of Massport's, environmental filings and whether they've said no to someone. I mean, look, the answer is if the proponents aren't answering the secretary's question to our satisfaction, then yeah, we're going to have some tough questions for them as well. This is not a hell-bent, development. So we've got to be satisfied that the questions are answered for sure. But the devil will be in the details, right? I mean, I can't commit to you exactly and specifically what question and how it needs to be answered. Suffice to say that, I'm very satisfied with the MEPA process proceeding and having the developer spend the next months to do their homework, right? I think one of the challenges with transportation generally is projections are difficult, right? So they can be directionally correct, but specifically wrong. Not sure I would get too hung up there, but at the same time, I know that, there were folks here in this call and others who, challenged the notion that, that there might be less flights because planes would be parked at Hanscom as opposed to taking off, dropping off empty. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm very curious to understand, the follow up there as well as an example, because I know there's a lot of folks who feel that wasn't credible. So, but look, I don't think I have a specific, red line, if you will. If they don't answer this, they're out. But suffice to say, I'm as curious to their process over the next several months as probably all of you are.
Wow, that was a complete non-answer, Jude.
Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks, Rich.
I mean, I don't have an answer for you. I can't say, specifically that, what I will or won't do. I need to see their information. So.
Thank you, Rich. I'll just
Sure.
note that the issues that were posed in the letter from the delegation are issues that were posed squarely at least a year before their document and their responses came out. And so we're not starting at zero here. They've had a long time to answer those questions. And they were not like off by a little bit. They were, as I think you said, directionally wrong, fundamentally flawed in terms of the way that they went about trying to measure those things.
Okay, so I'd like to thank you, Rich and Simon. I'd like to just ask if any else of the legislative delegation would like to ask a question, if you could raise your hand now. Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was looking for the raised hand. And I'm not surprised, but having followed Senator Barrett and Rep. Cataldo, they have done a good job in answering and asking the questions I would have, but I just, I've listened to your presentation. And by the way, Rich, thank you for taking on this challenge. And it is a challenge. And we go back to your job as Secretary of Transportation when I first started, and you did a great job then. And I expect that you're going to take on these challenges the same way you did then. But we come at this in a couple of ways. First of all, the use of Hanscom as a private airport, people for commercial jets. In my opinion, the reason that people are using commercial jets isn't because it's a more comfortable seat on a commercial flight, because those seats are still attached to the plane, that it's still late sometimes and it's just more comfortable, but it's still a commercial plane for them. They still go through the same security and have the same lines in the airport. It's more convenient if you can fly privately. So making it even more convenient by adding more hangar space is just logically what our constituents are looking to us and saying, we're making it even easier for people to choose to do that. And that's the challenge that we face. And that's why I think looking at this is difficult for us. And that's not a question, but my question is, and I think you may have touched upon it, but we got a response from the developers that characterize something that you really referred to. We call them, they call them ferry flights. And they're saying, like you said, this is, there won't be a significant impact because the number of flights taking off and landing will be justified by this other formula. And they give us this formula that makes no sense to anybody, including the administration. And Simon, to follow up on Simon's question, it's not giving a better answer. It's giving any answer at all, because we saw through that as just gobbledygook. It's just avoiding the question altogether. So we're hoping that if that happens even one more time, that there's no attempt to actually answer the question, that you will consider that seriously in your decisions on moving forward with this project.
No, I appreciate that, Rep, and no, I'll definitely take that under advisement. I appreciate that. I do.
Okay.
So,
you.
Rich, I had a comment which was sort of sparked by Rep. Cataldo's comment. You were mentioning before that most emissions come from commercial aviation,
Yeah.
and that private aviation's small in comparison to that. But the analysis we've done here in the Hanscom area towns area is that if the proponents of the North Airfield expansion were able to expand that 495,000 square feet of hangar space and put how many airplanes in, 75 airplanes in that hangar space. I can't remember exactly the number. That would generate more emissions than all of the houses and all of the cars in Lexington, Bedford, Concord, and Lincoln combined. So when you're looking at a group of people here who've dedicated decades of their lives to reducing the emissions in their towns, and to see one project wipe out any possibility of success in terms of lowering our emissions in our 4 towns, that we don't view that as small. We view that as sort of the massive thing that we're approaching every day in terms of trying to address how we can do a better thing for our communities. So that's really the way we're thinking about it. We don't want to see the emissions for our 4 towns double by one project.
No, that's fair, Mark, and I do appreciate that point. I didn't mean to downplay the importance of the development for your communities. All I meant to say was we need to solve that, but we've got to solve this aviation question.
So we have time for one more question. An elected official, an appointed official, excuse me, Christopher Elliott is the chair of the Hanscom Field Advisory Commission, and Christopher recognized you for a question. Then we'll let you go, Rich. Thank you for making.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Christopher, you look like you're in the desert, by the way. I don't know if that's true, but
I think it's Namibia, but it's the future of the world if we don't get climate change under control. So thank you, Mark, for giving me time, and thank you, Rich, for being here. So many great questions. It's hard, I have a dozen, but I reiterate almost everything that people have talked about before. I'm chair of the Hanscom Field Advisory Commission. I've been on it studying Hanscom Field for about 10 years. And really, so I sort of represent all 4 towns. And really the only thing that's acceptable to anybody or practically anybody here is the status quo. There's no public official, there's no leader of any civic group that's called for the reduction or elimination of the airport. And there's none who would have any tolerance for the expansion. So the status quo is what everybody is hoping for. On SAF, I know you have to go. I've studied this extensively. I don't believe there is such a good thing as SAF. I know there's reasons for all the ones that you've said are bad. Anything produced from corn, anything trucked up from Texas. I know the possibilities. I've studied this quite intensively. I'd really like to, before you make any decisions to support this, I think there's been this massive propaganda machine supporting SAF, and it looks like eventually everybody buckles just because of the amount of propaganda in support of it. I don't believe it has the technical merit. So I just want to make sure that we're involved and we get, not tonight, it's a long discussion, but that we're involved, fully involved in technical discussions, because we have a lot of technical people in this area. Lincoln Lab is right next door. A lot of people are senior engineers around here. And we've gone through these alternate forms of SAF in excruciating detail. And they solve one problem. Each new version solves one problem and creates two others. They really don't have a thing that adds up. They're going to either blow out the agriculture, blow out the electrical system. The so-called e-fuels made completely by electrolysis, we can't support that in the electrical system. It would take the entire equivalent of the current electrical grid while we're trying to make that renewable. We can't do it twice.
Christopher, in terms of.
So
in
those
terms
are, yeah, so my question is
Question.
just to make sure that we're involved in all of those
I
discussions.
appreciate that, Chris. No, thank you, thank you. And no, appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, Rich, do you have any final words you'd like to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, perhaps notwithstanding some of my spiciness, I do really appreciate, the feedback, the input, and as I hope to listen, Christopher, I appreciate some of your points, and hopefully you've at least heard some of, my perspective as a new CEO. But we're going to continue to work with you and see if we can work where we can work together to address a number of these issues. And Christopher, I do appreciate your point that this group and others are not asking for us to close up shop and move away. You see the value of a functioning Hanscom at a status quo, and I do appreciate you saying that. So, but that's it, Mark. Thank you again for allowing me to spend the time with you all, and
Thank you for coming, and thank
My
you for
pleasure.
spending a significant.
Thank you
amount.
very much, Rich. Appreciate it.
my pleasure, Senator. Thank you. Thanks all.
So what we are going to do now is go on to item 2 on our agenda, which is also a Massport agenda item. It's more the local update for Hanscom. So wanted to go to Amber. Have you figured out your mic, Amber?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. We did have a Hanscom Field Advisory Commission meeting last week. And I went over our operations report, and I'll try to make it quick because I know we've been here for quite a while now. But what I will say is that we were down in December 3.1% for operations compared to last December. And for the calendar year, we're down 3% compared to 2023 operations. We had 119,000 operations for the year. And that's the second most that we've had since, COVID was the lowest that we've had. So these are the second historically operations that we've had, the second low. And it's 7.4% from pre-COVID 2019. So our operations are still declining slightly, but we're hopeful that will stay status quo. And on the matter of our projects reports, I gave a report on our salt storage shed relocation, and that's the project at the request of the Lincoln Conservation Commission to relocate our salt storage that we use to salt the landside roads. We relocated that to a more remote location out of the parking lot, which was near some wetlands. So that project is actually complete. The facility's in use. The only thing that we are waiting for is we were not quick enough to do the final course of paving before the snow flew. So we'll do the final course of paving in the spring, but the facility itself is in use. The next project that I had an update for on Tuesday was the electric aircraft chargers. So there's a lot of new faces here, so I'll just go over the project again. Beta Technologies is a company that is working on an electric aircraft. as well as electric aircraft chargers nationwide, a system nationwide. And they have a nationwide contract with Atlantic Aviation. So they've been working with Atlantic Aviation at Hanscom Field to install electric chargers for aircraft for use at Hanscom. And the permitting was completed last November, and they've been diligently working on the project. And our last update was that the project was on hold, awaiting to be connected with Concord Municipal. I guess they have a moratorium typically on all digging projects in Concord over the winter, but they did actually allow us to go forward. So that project was taking place today. They were trying to dig to get to the connection to hook up. So those will be available for use soon. The next update that I had was that Hanscom Field terminal building upgrades will take place in the second quarter of 2025. We'll bring the project really is to upgrade a number of features to comply with current building code, including elevators and bathrooms and that sort of thing. And then in addition, we'll do some additional resilience and security upgrades. And also we have airport rescue and firefighting solar panel installation on the roof, as well as our north T hangars, the new set of T hangars in the north that are in the Bedford quadrant of the airport. We're installing solar panels atop the roof of one of those T hanger buildings as well. So we anticipate those projects to be completed by spring 2025. And those were the Hanscom updates.
So thank you, Amber. I had a couple more questions for you on status updates. So
Okay.
Rich Davey mentioned that they're expecting a response from the North Airfield developers for an SDEIR. Do you have any expected timing on when there might be an SDEIR for the public to review and comment?
I don't have any specific timing. I expect that it will be a minimum of a few more months based on the last update I've heard from them, but I do not have any specific timing. I'm sorry.
And do we expect there also to be time from when the SDEIR is released and for people to review and make public comment? Is that the
Yeah,
process?
so
I
the
understand.
process will be the same. It will go through, they'll publish it on the MIPA register, and anybody who's commented will also get a copy. They'll get notification as well. You'll have the opportunity, there'll be a public comment period, just like there was last time.
Thank you. Thank you. The second status update question I had was on the ESPR. So there was public comment until September or something. And so I was just wondering what your thought process was or what your expectations were for when the final ESPR might be coming up.
Oh, it is posted. It has been finalized and it's posted on
Okay.
the Massport website.
Okay, I'd missed that. So thank you for letting us know.
Enjoy. It's a nice read.
Okay, well, didn't have anything else to read tonight, so there we go. All right, thank you. Thank you for your update.
No
So
problem.
with that, I'd like to move on to Hanscom Air Force Base updates. Jessica?
Thank you, Mark. I do have a couple of updates to share this evening. The first one is, well, I find it an exciting public affairs office update. So we have done some restructuring with our team, and we have stood up a community engagement team, which I was hired to lead. And so I'm excited to introduce one of my team members, Jayma Fogg, is online with us tonight. You may see her attending some of these meetings in the future. And then also our colleague, Glenn Kerneski, who, as you know, has been deployed with the Army Reserves, is back in Massachusetts. He'll be back in the office next month, which is very exciting. So he will also be part of the engagement team, and we'll be hopefully hiring for a third position. So great for us to grow the team and be able to engage with the towns and others even more. So very excited to do that. And then our other update is just almost more of a thank you. We were able to meet with many of the town representatives, with MEMA, the National Park, and others recently to talk about 250th plans and how the base can be partnering with all of you in that, making sure that we're collaborating together, sharing information so that our residents and workforce know what's happening, and then communicating things that you all may need to know, discussing how we might partner together. So I just wanted to thank all of you for making the time to talk with us, and wanted you to know that you should feel free to reach out to myself and to Jema if we can be of any assistance on that topic going forward.
Well, thank you. Jessica, if you could just send me an email offline with the contact information for Jema, that would be great.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and nice to meet you, Jema, and welcome back, Glenn. Or is he here? Not yet?
Not this evening, but he should be joining you all for the next meeting.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing him again. So item 4 on the agenda is for municipal updates, and I'll go back to Emily for Bedford municipal updates.
Sure. So we are working on the FY26 budget in preparation for town meeting. We are one of the earliest, if not the earliest towns to have town meeting. Ours is at the end of March, which means all of our budgeting information needs to be ready and done and finalized somewhere around mid-February, which is generally impossible because we just don't have the information we need from the state. One of the big challenges this year that was also a challenge in our current fiscal year is some unexpected increases in costs through the school department, particularly in terms of transportation. So last year we had to ask for some additional appropriations. We set up a special education reserve fund, town meeting set that up. And so we're trying to manage those costs that become unmanageable. So we're having a lot of discussions. We've reformed what we used to call kind of a fiscal planning coordinating committee. Right now, it's just a working group of select board, FinCom, school committee, chair and clerk, and staff to try to work through, like, look, we have one pile of money. How are we going to allocate it? We all have needs. So that work continues. It's not fun. We're still in a very good financial position, but we're looking at, the headwinds in a couple years, and where free cash is going, and trying to make some hard choices and decisions now to make future years a little less painful. On the good side of things, our new fire station project is progressing pretty nicely. We're a little bit later than we thought we would be in terms of getting documents out to bid, because we were doing some extra work on some aspects of the design, including stormwater maintenance. So we wanted to make the plan able to accommodate not only where we are right now in terms of our stormwater needs, but where we're going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So we should be ready to advertise in the Central Register within a couple weeks, hoping to have a contract awarded in mid-April. There was some pre-qualification work happening, and we had a lot of interest from general contractors and subbids. So very hopeful that is working its way through, and we're going to have a beautiful facility that really meets what the department and the town needs. So those are my two big things. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim.
Sure. Here in Lincoln, we try to compete with Emily and have our town meeting in March also. So we're busy with budget also, and have the same kind of challenges. For instance, coordinating with Sudbury, who has a later town meeting, but we share a high school. So there's all kinds of fun issues this time of year, busy time of year for us on the finance side. We are steaming ahead with our community center building project. That one is well underway, and we're hoping to complete that sometime next year and take occupancy there. Another thing that's happening that I thought might generate a little discussion in this group is what to do about President Trump's executive orders. There's some impacts to the towns. We're talking to town council. We're hoping that the state provides some leadership on these issues, but we're worried that there's going to be some fairly major impact on funding for any of us that get federal money and would love to share notes with other selects about strategies and what we're doing about this. So that's a recent and fairly big issue in my opinion. Other than that, I'm happy to announce that we did get some funding for a couple different projects here in town. One is that we're going to have to do a fairly major water main replacement down the center of Lincoln, of 100-year-old piping. And we did manage to get a little bit of money from the state thanks to having a HCA plan adopted. We were eligible for this funding. So that was a nice benefit of getting our HCA plan approved. By the way, we have not yet received any applications for Housing Choice Act developments here in Lincoln, but if we're following Lexington's lead, we expect there to be a little bit of a delay in those kind of applications. I believe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you guys had about a year delay before you actually started getting actual applications. So
We've had
see.
2, possibly 3,
2?
in the
Okay.
past couple months. So it's
It
happening.
does come, it just takes a little while, right? Yeah, so that's what we're still waiting for the shoe to drop here. That's it in Lincoln.
Thank you. Terry?
Yes, sorry, I had to find my mute button there. Yeah, I want to thank Jim for mentioning, I think that would be a very good future topic that we all have in common, talking about how we're going to deal with the changing climate, shall we say, in terms of many issues, grants, infrastructure, immigration, etc. So in Concord, we have a lot of the same issues, but our town meeting this year is very late. We've moved it to June to be well after the 250th celebration. And yet we still have the same challenges with the budget. We're trying to coordinate better between the select board, the school committee, and the finance committee. We've had 3 or 4 joint meetings. So things are somewhat better in terms of communication, but we haven't really solved the problem that we have a possible override coming in the next few years and what to do about that. We are developing a stormwater utility, which I don't know if any of the other towns are doing, similar to the enterprise fund that we have for water and for sewer. We are going to, we passed the first phase of it at last town meeting, and now at this town meeting, we're going to be introducing some rate structures. And I mean, the idea is that everyone is a user. Every time things go down the drain or whatever, we're using resources and there's no money to pay for it. And then the culverts are overflowing and suddenly we need $1 million. And so we're going to try and get our house in order with all of that. I did attend the meeting with that Jessica spoke of. It was a good meeting. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was great to have the Air Force people and all of the different towns. Susie from Lexington, I've forgotten her name now, her last name.
Barry.
Right, right. So that was great. We had a lot of public safety folks, a lot of coordination. We are doing a town meeting initiative, like I heard some of you speak about at the last meeting, where we've done a survey. We're looking into a home rule petition now for remote participation. We are probably going to do an experiment with the clickers. All of these are to try to get more participation at town meeting. And we got a formal letter from the EOLHC saying we are in, quote, interim compliance. We still do not have full compliance with that MBTA Communities Act. So we're, because of the Milton case, things have changed a little bit, and we're waiting to see what is going to happen with all of that. And our MCI group is working hard on the closure of the prison. We have some state funds. We are hiring a consultant. We are working with the DOT on redesign of the Rotary. MCI is probably, DCAM is going to probably give or sell to the town the wastewater treatment facility from MCI, which will be a great asset to help us. We were unable to meet our SHI goals with the affordable housing because we were constrained on development, and this is going to be a huge help now. So that's kind of it in a nutshell in Concord.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, can I interject for just a second?
Go for it.
Terry, I forgot to mention that Lincoln is also doing a town meeting study committee where we're looking at remote participation and clickers and all that stuff. Maybe I can touch base with you offline sometime about
Sure.
those
That's why I brought it up, because at the last meeting I failed to mention it and you mentioned it. So I thought, oh, I better remember next time. So yes,
We should touch base sometime about that. Those are
that
fun.
sounds great.
Bedford's in the middle of our annual, every 5 years charter and bylaw review, and the town moderator in that committee is also thinking, maybe we should push our meeting into May. Maybe we should think about a different day.
Well, maybe this is a topic for a future meeting, Mark.
Okay,
There's not interest.
all right. Well, that's on the agenda for a little bit later. Okay,
If I could just say, this is my last term on my last year on the select board. So there, I will still be on the HFAC after June, but you will have a new HATS
oh,
representative.
really? I didn't realize that. Okay. So, okay, so we'll have to have one more meeting before you.
Well, we have all the way till June.
Mark, you're staying with me, right?
Yes, yes. All right. So let me give you a Lexington update. I'll try to do this rapid fire. There's a lot of things going on in Lexington. We have a new town manager who started beginning of October. I can't believe it's been that long since we've met last. And I'll make a joint announcement for Terry and I. Ken Burns is coming to both Lexington and Concord on April 17th to unveil his new documentary series, The American Revolution. There will be an event in Lexington and in Concord that are both open to the public on April 17th. So if you're a Ken Burns fan. The Lexington Select Board last night approved moving forward with a 25% transportation design for Hartwell Avenue, Bedford Street, jug handle area near the border of Bedford for submission to the TIP. And you know how this goes. If all goes well, construction will be completed, Emily, in the 2040 timeframe. That's how long Mass DOT takes to do these things. They're also planning to do an update of the Cloverleaf intersection at Route 95 and Bedford Street at approximately the same time. Also, last night, the Lexington Select Board approved a land disposition agreement with Causeway Development to build approximately 40 what are looking like extremely beautiful units of 100% affordable housing at 60% AMI on 3 acres of town-owned property. That construction is expected to be completed in the 2028 timeframe. Lexington, following Concord by decades, has eliminated the sale of single-use plastic water bottles effective January 1st, 2025. What are you, 15 years now, Terry? And
It's maybe 12, something like that. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So we're following a long way behind, but that's where we are. And Lexington's phase out of commercially operated gas-powered leaf blowers goes into effect on March 15th of 2025. Lexington was also one of 19 communities that applied for the first round of the Climate Leader Community Certification and Grant Program. We expect DOR to announce whether communities are certified or not in the spring. Also, Terry, to your point, EOHLC yesterday or 2 days ago sent us a note saying that we are fully compliant with the MBTA zoning in after reviewing the emergency regulations that were just released. So we're still fully compliant. The town continues to be highly engaged in the planning process for our new Lexington High School with some of the largest financial summits we've ever had in our history. A final design has been selected. The design team is beginning schematic design phase with the goal of delivering a net zero all-electric building and expects to submit the schematic design documents to MSBA in August. The current plan is for a 475,000 square foot building, including an expanded field house, housing 2,395 students. And this is the thing that is getting a lot of attention in Lexington at an expected cost of $645 million. So the big thing that I'd like to talk about that there's been a lot of activity since our last HATS meetings on MBTA community zoning in Lexington. Those proposals continue to accelerate in Lexington with approximately 1,100 units being proposed, including 161 inclusionary units. And Emily, 447 of those units are being proposed right near the Bedford Street, Hartwell Avenue intersection. The Lexington Select Board has received a petition signed by over 200 Lexington residents requesting that we hold a special town meeting to roll this zoning back, capping the density of the developments and significantly scaling back the number of acres that we put into MBTA zoning districts. So the Select Board has scheduled that special town meeting for February 3rd. But special town meeting won't take a vote on that date because the planning board has not had time to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to town meeting. But we are going to have, so there's a lot of pressure in Lexington to change our MBTA zoning. So that's what and budgets. Emily, we have our final budget summit on Thursday night. The select board approved the budget going into the financial summit. So we are holding also a March town meeting, and so that's where we are on that. The big thing, I can't remember who brought it up, the pressures on the budget. The biggest pressures on the budget this year for us, we have 11% increase in healthcare and health benefit costs, health premiums, and 9.5% increase in waste management costs. And so, yes, there are real concerns. We've got a balanced budget this year, but there are real concerns going forward. Any questions, comments?
Quick one for me, Mark, on the petition from residents to roll back MBTA community rules. If you're having a special town meeting on Feb 3, but haven't had time to.
We're gonna have a 5-minute meeting, town meeting on February 3rd to adjourn until the planning board hearings are closed.
Okay, so you're going to proceed with this at some point, maybe at your regular town meeting?
Yes, no, it will still be special town meeting. It'll just be like, I think, the middle of March is probably when we end up having the planning board hearings closed.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification, and I'm interested in how that proceeds.
Yes, as we all are. Okay. No other questions, then I think it goes to meeting minutes. So you've all seen the meeting minutes now a bunch of time, draft meeting minutes from September 5th. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 5th.
So moved.
Okay, by a roll
Second.
call. Okay, second, by a roll call vote. Terry,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
I'm a yes. So the meeting minutes are approved. So the next thing we have to do is talk about topics and next meeting dates. I have some potential next meeting dates of March 20th, April 24th, May 15th, May 22nd, June 19th, and June 26th. So obviously, we don't need all of those, but I was just throwing out a bunch of Thursdays and just wanted to check if those seem like a reasonable thing. Do you think we need to have a meeting in March if we're not going to be looking at
I'll be away, March 20th.
Yeah,
Pardon
and
me?
I don't know who's taking over for me. So we usually have a couple meetings to kind of reconfigure liaison assignments, so I don't think there would be a Bedford person
Okay.
available necessarily in March.
And I'm not sure we need to meet that quickly again as well.
I'm busy in March with my town meeting too, Mark, so I prefer April as our next meeting if that works for everybody.
Does April 24th look like a good date?
Yes.
How about Terry?
I think that's good. I'm trying to think if that's still school vacation week, but
It
that,
is.
that
It
might
is?
not matter to us.
It is school vacation week. Yeah, it's
Oh.
late this year. Easter's late.
Oh, that's right. That's right. April, it's Easter
It's the
on,
week of the 21st. Easter's the 20th. Yeah.
right. Okay. Okay. So
It might be okay, though.
Still okay for me, but
Okay. Okay. And then if we're going to meet in April, then I don't think it would probably make sense to meet in March. I meet in May, but
probably
do,
not. Probably like maybe an early June date if you want to get one more on the calendar.
would June 19th look good?
I will not be a select board member
Okay.
after.
June 19th is Juneteenth. You
Oh,
can't do
that's
that.
right. That's right. Okay.
That's why Margaret's shaking her hand.
Thank
I
you,
thought
thank you, Emily.
it doesn't move to a Monday?
Does not.
Okay.
Mark, can you
It's
move
like
it
Veterans Day.
Can you move it a little earlier, like the 12th?
Sure,
Does that work?
sure.
I just want to do it before school vacation
It's
starts.
out.
I will pass these dates along to the rest of the board.
Okay, so what we're talking about is April 24th and June 12th is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll be there on April 24th and I'll pass along the June 12th to the new chair.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right. So Jim, you said you had some ideas on topics.
Well, I wanted to do something around federal priorities and executive orders. We should probably touch base closer to the meeting about what's the actual action items there, but I would like to put that in as a placeholder anyway. I'd be happy to also have, as usual, some discussion of MBTA communities. That's an ongoing issue for all of us.
Okay, the other thing is there was at least some sense that the supplemental DEIR might be out in 3 months, so that April
Put
24th.
a placeholder in for that for sure. But
SDE.
who knows if they'll actually have delivered by then.
Okay. Any other suggestions of things we should be discussing? All right, that's good enough. So with that, we had a lot of time for questions, but not necessarily everybody from the, okay, so I think what we'll say is we're 8:43 here. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, Terry,
I
Emily,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and I'm a yes as well. Thank you. And Emily, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This has really been, all of my Hanscom work has been really educational, and I appreciate everybody's passion and commitment about this. So thank you for all your help over the years.
We greatly appreciate your contributions, Emily.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've learned
Been
a
a
lot
pleasure
from
working
you.
with you.
And Terry, it's been nice to have you with us briefly.
I'll be back in April, but
Okay,
We'll
yeah,
get her one more time, Mark.
that's right.
Okay. Good night,
All right.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. All. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, whoops. Mark, how do I get the recording? There's a couple of little things I missed.
Okay, I'll get it tomorrow from,
I'm in no rush, but,
get it tomorrow from somebody on staff and then I'll get
okay,
it.
thanks a lot.
Sure thing.